absolutely no idea where it's going to go. Like literally, because I've read those books a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then I
Well,
read your most recent article. Um, but yeah, yeah. So
well,
let's
let's
what?
dive in. No,
Yeah,
I
let's
was
do
just
it.
going to say, well, the goal of the book will be to not embarrass myself as a Tolkien nerd and to bring people who don't necessarily read Tolkien like a nerd like I do,
Yeah,
get them more interested.
I'm more of a Lewis nerd, like
Oh,
Prelandria,
really?
all of that
Oh,
stuff. Oh
wow.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. So my daughter's the same way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Has she read all of those?
We've read together like three of them. She was in. They did an adaptation of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for her ballet company. So she was last role. She was the understudy to Lucy,
Okay.
I think, and then she had her regular roles. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. The so the Narnia books are not my favorite books of his.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's got Out of the Silent Planet,
Right.
Prelandria, and then The Hideous Strength. Those are actually probably my favorite.
Okay.
Um,
Are those more science fiction-y type?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I don't know. That's not a really good way to explain them. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. They're pretty good, but they're
Yeah.
not. They're still overtly kind of religious,
Yeah.
but in
That's
almost a more metaphorical way, if possible, than the Narnia books. So less allegory,
yeah,
more metaphor.
yeah. I That's one of the kind of things that puts me off to Narnia. It's like, dude, this is too much of a one-to-one correspondence here.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, like in one of the ones, I want to say Prealandria, like it's almost like a religious retelling of Plato's cave,
Okay,
um, which is fun, but only if you like
sure. Yeah,
philosophy. Anyway,
yeah.
anyway, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Because we're all professionals here. Here we go. Matthew, welcome back to the show. I think this is two. This might be
This
two.
this is two.
Might be, yeah,
Yeah,
two. So, see, I can count big numbers. Two.
big
Dose.
big numbers. Well, remind me, am I allowed to say cuss words here?
You can say whatever you like.
Well, last time it was the devoted as fuck came out, and now we're going to talk about something entirely different.
Yeah, you can say whatever you like. My kids do listen to a few, but only if I flag them as non-explicit. But
Okay.
I've been known to not edit myself on this, and I will not have you edit yourself. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, the only thing I edit is anytime there's stuff in a cup. Sometimes that's bourbon, sometimes it's water, sometimes it's coffee, but it's always a coffee mug. It's just none of
Yeah.
anybody's business.
That's right. Well, no, I stopped drinking for my own health, so
Mm,
it is coffee actually.
oh, it's
Yeah.
six. It's so it's seven. That's a. You're not going to sleep.
It's well, no, it's also decaf because I don't drink caffeine either. I'm like so straight edge, except I smoke weed. Am I allowed to say that? I'm in California, so you can't get me in trouble.
It's legal in Virginia now. You can grow your
Oh,
own plants. I
good.
think you can have three. Is what you can grow.
Okay,
I
well,
think any more than
make
three,
them
and you're technically
make them three huge ones.
yeah, yeah. I think any more than three, and you're like a like a drug pusher. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't
there
know.
you go.
Anyway, not while
Yeah,
you're here. So, we had been chatting back and forth. You've written like 87 and a half books, 5
yeah,
million blog posts,
yeah.
a lot of them satirical, which I've been enjoying, lurking in the comment sections on Facebook when people are like, is this satirical? My favorite thing is where you're like, look at the tags at the bottom,
Yeah,
which
well,
makes me laugh.
it's so like I like the fact that people don't. I mean, I think the sign of being a good writer of satire is that people don't know if it's satire or not.
Mhm.
My favorite thing is when they're like, I googled this, like so, like you went out of your time, you spent time googling it and looking for sources, and they're like, "Where's the source?" One person asked for a source on a piece that I wrote about a time traveler who was like touting natural health instead of vaccines, and he died at like 30 or something. Um, they're like, "Where's the source for this?" I'm like, "Oh my god, it's a time
Where-
traveler, so might not be real."
Where's you should honestly make a small like repository of sources that you just cite back. Like just buy a domain
Oh,
name
that would be
and make that
fantastic.
be like just make up the sources. And that way people are like, yeah, I looked at this source work. I bought the book. No, you didn't. You didn't buy the book. Stop lying. You didn't do
Come up with an abstract and everything.
it. And all that could be fun. But
It
a lot
could
of
be.
time.
It sounds like a lot of work though.
Yeah. Well, let the kids write the sources. I mean, honestly,
That's right.
who cares? Because
That's right.
nobody's going to fact check it anyway.
No.
Anyway, not while you're here. So we had settled on like religion, theology, Tolkien, and maybe I'm saying all of that wrong. Um, what does Tolkien, for those that are unfamiliar with anything outside of the movies, the Lord of the Rings movies, have to do with religion, faith, theology, etc.?
Well, I mean, Tolkien was a devout Catholic, so take from that what you will. I think when people talk about Tolkien and Tolkien's Catholicism, as if Catholicism means one thing, I think they're being like a little bit unfair to the faith because, I mean, I grew up Protestant, evangelical. Now I'm not, definitely, assuredly. If you listen to the last episode, you know that. But I grew up thinking just like, oh, Catholicism meant X, Y, or Z, and that's it. All Catholics. I mean, it's kind of like this monolithic voice, but it's not. Just like any faith tradition, sect, denomination, it's not one univocal thing. And Tolkien, I think, was really careful not to imbue his writing with his own beliefs. So I wrote an article, I don't know if it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I don't know when this comes out, but in April I wrote it, asking the question, was Tolkien a universalist? And my conclusion is, like, spoiler alert, we don't know. Like, we don't. I point out to the fact that some of his characters had some prophecy about like a restoration of everything, like all humans, all children of Iluvatar, which is the name for God in Tolkien's world. But not all prophecies were equal, and not all characters of Middle Earth had the same philosophy. So I think that's where Tolkien takes himself out of the writing entirely, and Middle Earth is its own thing. He's creating a mythology, and so there's questions that Tolkien himself doesn't know. He's taking the role of a translator of books that exist by people and characters who wrote the books from Middle Earth.
Yeah.
So he's not writing. I mean, he's literally writing the Lord of the Rings, but in his like portrayal, he's editing or translating, I should say, translating a book that's already written that he's calling the Lord of the Rings, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the character you're referencing there is Tom Bombadil, which, correct? If that's what you're referencing with the person that said the reconciliation or something a minute ago. Is that who you're referencing?
Tom Bombadil is one of them. Yeah, he has a statement of that, and then there's an elf who's having a conversation with a human, and this isn't in the Lord of the Rings. It's, I believe, in the Silmarillion, which is kind of like the mythology of the of the world where Lord of the Rings comes from. And who is it? It's Finrod, an elf, talking to a human or a person, Andreth, and he says, "If we are indeed the Eruhin, the children of the One, then he will not suffer himself to be deprived of his own, not by any enemy, not even by ourselves." So it's this, but all we can conclude from that is Finrod was a universalist, right? We can't say Tolkien was. I mean, because Tolkien created characters that he himself, didn't know all the way through, right?
Yeah. So the average listener, they've only watched the movies. What do you think would be most? So you're working on a book for all of this.
Yeah,
like
a book that I take more seriously than theological books, I should say.
But you're weaving theology into it, correct?
Of course, yeah. Philosophy and ethics, and ecology and everything.
Yeah. So where does one go with that? Because much like the contemporary of Tolkien, Lewis Tolkien, a lot of people have written a lot of stuff about them. His family, his son, correct?
Christopher Tolkien was big involved in editing and
So there's a plethora of work there. Where do you even begin with that if you're writing to the person I think that would pick that up is either a Lord of the Rings fan and they don't care about religion, or maybe it's a religion fan and they're like, yeah, I mean, I watched the movies and I watched the Peter Jackson cut too. So that's extra. I've got the extra movie.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin? Like, why? Where are you starting with that?
Like, why write the books? Who are my target audience?
Like pitch me, because I've read Lord of the Rings. I prefer the books over the movies. That's not always the case, by the way. I'm not that person that says that that's always true.
Sure.
but I do remember specifically because they're just characters and story arcs that don't exist in the movies, and it pissed me off that they're
Right.
not there.
Yeah, like
Because I
Tom
became
Bombadil.
invested. Yeah, correct. Yeah, because I became invested, and I'm like, well, what? Come on, you just skipped things. Like you
Yeah.
skipped 300 pages. Who the hell
Yeah,
are
right.
you? You can't just
Right.
skip 300 pages. Yeah.
Right.
So how do you begin to tackle that? Like, I don't know how to, I hope I'm asking that correctly.
Yeah, no, you are. It's I think that it really is because I'm of the philosophy now that we should our epistemology, what we know, how we know what we know, starts with like direct experiences, right?
Mm,
And so I have found um, peace, tranquility, presentness, being now in living in the way that hobbits tend to live in Middle Earth. I make sure to point out that hobbits aren't perfect; they're insular and they're sometimes xenophobic,
mm,
and so I make sure to discuss that. And not
mm,
all hobbits are, and we see a story arc with many hobbits who break outside of that insular worldview. You know,
yeah.
Frodo, Sam, Merry Pippin, um, but I found peace in gardening, in being one with the earth, and leading a more simple, less chaotic life. And I think that there's practical wisdom in the book that I'm writing, and there's practical wisdom all in. I honestly think Tolkien was one of the greatest genius minds of our time,
Mm,
and so the movies are great, but I think there's something deeper going on there, and I think it's as profound as any other mythology, even
mm,
though it's fiction. So I see that, and Tolkien would be put off by having his works compared as an allegory. I'm not allegorizing Middle Earth with the Bible, but I will say I will put it up next to the Bible as profound of a mythology that exists.
mm, mm.
So
So
I think there's just there's so much there that you don't really get from just the films. And the films are good for what they are. I wasn't a huge fan of the Hobbit trilogy, but
I
that's
didn't
a
watch it. I did not watch it.
it's okay. But that's
Mostly
it.
because Bilbo doesn't interest me as a
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, I could see that. Sure. And it's hard to make, I mean, The Hobbit was kind of a children's-ish juvenile book, and
Mhm.
it's good for what it is, but it's certainly not three-hour long movies, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I've never like I've tried to read The Hobbit and I've never actually finished the book.
Yeah.
I just that character and the best part of Lord of the Rings is he's not in the book all that often. Like it's just I mean he's almost like the MacGuffin that just begins the story.
Hmm.
And then we circle back up eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it didn't anyway. That's me reading my stuff into it. So
Sure.
what is some of that? So draw some similarities for those people that you're like, yeah, how can I read the similarity? Which I've never read that book either. Um, like, what is the theology of, or the mythology, the theologies
Yeah.
of that world, and like, what is it that we're learning from that? Like, how are we garnering wisdom from that?
Um, well, see, of course, there's not one theology throughout. You know, there's elves speculate on their relationship to the Valar, to Iluvatar. These are the gods and sort of angelic, creative being, right? Like the pantheon,
Hmm.
in in their theology. But I mean, the first thing that pops to my head when you ask that is that so the fall of Middle Earth, or Arda, which is all of creation, right? All the Middle Earth is just a portion of, we're familiar with it, but it's just a portion, right? So the fall is because of some dissonance in a melody sung by these angelic type beings, and I kind of, if you compared that to the fall of, in Augustinian theology or Calvinist theology, where we're totally depraved, where we're worms, where we're all these sort of things. I see, as a musician myself, like someone who had, I went to school for music.
Well, I didn't
I,
know that.
I, yeah, I like that analogy or that understanding of a fall much better because there's this created being Melkor who goes by Morgoth later. He's kind of like the big bad guy before Sauron. He starts to sing this discordant, this dissonant, like a probably even something worse than a minor seventh chord. It could be a diminished something. And
Yeah, but that
Iluvatar,
E minor seventh is in all the Hillsong songs, though. So that is the only angelic chord, correct?
I wouldn't say anything Hillsong does is angelic at these days. um, but so the point being is that Melkor sings this dissonant chord, this dissonant melody, and Iluvatar is like, there's nothing you can do that's going to thwart this beautiful creation. And so what is created is a visual and physical representation of the music. So everything you read in the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, everything is like it's the melody that's been created in like real time, right? So all the suffering, all the dissonance in the world is because of Melkor's original counter melody that
Mhm.
that is dissonant. But even that is going to be worked toward this good in the end. And as a musician, it's like, yeah, if you just play in your key, it like a C major key, right? It's okay, I guess. But it's when you like a minor fourth in so if you play an F minor in a C, that's out of key technically. But if you play that in the right way, it's like, oh, it hits you so much more profoundly. So
Mhm.
in the same way, even though we have all this shit that's going on in the world and great suffering, and in the end it's going to somehow work out, and the story's going to be more complete than if nothing bad ever happened.
Mm.
And I wouldn't go so far as to like universalize that theology as like a theodicy and an explanation for suffering, but I like the analogy much better because frankly, the analogies for that kind of stuff in Christianity is just so
Yeah.
meh at best.
Yeah.
And it is but an analogy. Again, it's a mythology, so it's not necessarily like some theological thesis. It's just a way to explain why, if you're going to explain suffering and the fall and whatever is going on, why so many things are messed up, I like the analogy of a diminished chord a lot better than some of the vapid things we say.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know music theory, but I do play the guitar. I
Yeah.
I know like 9 different ways to play like a B minor 7.
Yeah. Okay. There you
Um,
go.
and I will say, depending on the song, I'm like, oh yes, right up here, ninth fret, these 3 strings. This is the B minor 7 that belongs when the piano
Yeah.
plays it. I have no
Yeah.
idea why, but I do
Yeah.
know that feeling we were talking about. We're like, yeah, that hits right. Like that is
Right.
so much better. There's no
Hmm.
bass in it. It's all the middle notes, and I know middle notes is not the way to say that, but that's the way that it is in my head. You should
Yeah.
see when I'm singing and I have to sing like in front of people. Since I can't read music, I'm basically drawing a waveform on how I should be hitting the notes, but I have no
Okay.
idea how it clicks in my head.
Yeah.
But for some reason, your analogy there, it hits. So you say in your most recent blog post that you are leaning towards Tolkien being influenced possibly by George MacDonald. Um, why? Like I don't know enough about Tolkien or honestly George MacDonald to do that. Though I will say I'm sure these exist elsewhere, but I've put 2 of these out. So I've been audibly recording his unspoken sermons, partly
Mm.
because I want to speak them, even though I'm certain someone else has done them. But I've never read them, never
Yeah.
been influenced by them. So I've only done the first 2, the Consuming Fire and the something in the mist, Child in the Midst, I think is what it's called. The first 2. How is that influence present in the writings of Tolkien? Like, where are you drawing that from?
Oh, I don't. The inspiration for saying that was just sort of offhanded. I don't. I would say there's definitely probably some indirect influences. I would say that because of Tolkien's relationship with Lewis, who was highly influenced by MacDonald,
Mm,
that Tolkien would at least be kind of secondhand, at least knowledgeable about him.
mm,
Um, George MacDonald was Scottish, I believe. Tolkien, uh, I think, was born in South Africa or lived there for a short period of time, but then lived in the UK.
mm,
Um, I mean, I would say that some of Iluvatar, God, God in the Silmarillion, would kind of have some of that same passion and fire, and I think understanding of I think the understanding of a sort of restorative justice, those themes are prevalent in Tolkien's
Hmm.
world, and
Hmm.
same with George MacDonald. For instance, the men of the East who fight alongside Sauron at the end of the Return of the King, Aragorn pardons them. They never, they never fought for the men of the West with the elves and the dwarves, and so Aragorn as a king figure is it tends toward the side of mercy and forgiveness, and a sort of restorative justice in a way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. What is so? I want to ask some questions about just what I read in your last blog post because I don't know any of these names like Morgoth, and I'm not even sure that I'm going to say these right. I'm also very thankful. I don't know if you know this or not. In all the extra free time that we have when we do podcasts, I transcribe these, and so I'm excited that these words I do not have to go and find in the Silmarillion because some of them are in the blog post. And if I can't find one, I'm just going to message you and say, "Hey, at
There you go.
minute
That's fine.
7, what the heck is that word? Like I don't know what that is."
Yeah.
Because it matters. They're real words that someone bled onto a page, and so I want to be respectful of that. Like, what is that character? Is that um, I don't know. What is that character? And I guess to kind of contrast it in relationship to a Sauron, or even in relationship to the church or the faith, or the like, what would that
Mm.
character like? What would that correlation be for today?
I guess. Well, okay. So Melkor or Morgoth. So I think Melkor originally, and then after the quote unquote fall, generally goes by the term Morgoth. I mean, so he's like more of a so a part of the Ainur, Ainur. It's like a trying to think of an analogy, kind of like an angelic being or something in
Mm,
that sort of metaphysical ontological hierarchy. Fell first, fell away from the melodic, happy major, probably major key music,
hmm.
and Sauron was, like his chief um, captain general in a way, if if you want to use like
Sure.
army terms.
Okay.
So I guess Morgoth would be like the devil of sorts, and Sauron would be whoever the demon, the opposite of like Michael, the archangel. That
Gotcha.
sort of,
Yeah.
if we're
Yeah.
gonna compare and contrast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, how do I want to say this? So, is there a systematic theology to the world of Tolkien?
I would yes and no, I guess. Probably certain characters would have systematic theologies, and some would have none. Like
Mm,
hobbits have no religion at all; they're completely secular.
mm,
In the book, I say that the only thing religious is their love of farming. Like so they, so yeah, it I would say they're systematic, yeah, but maybe the elves would probably have more systematic theology than the hobbits, and the dwarves are entirely different, and the men are the men.
yeah. So you begin the book. When is it out? Like when is
Oh,
it
I
going to
don't,
be
I,
published?
I don't know.
How much?
Fall
How much?
maybe.
So how much have you written?
Pushing towards half.
Huh.
Yeah.
So where do you jump into? Do you open up like are you just lifting directly from Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion or the Hobbit, or I assume there are other books that I'm unaware of. I've literally only read those 3 books.
Yeah.
Like, are you just lifting characters and then breaking them apart? Are you lifting out themes? Like what? Like how are you going about it?
Yeah, so the title is called The Wisdom of Hobbits. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm specifically focusing on hobbits, though I do talk about all sorts of other things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm focusing on them because Tolkien has this famous quote in one of his letters, letter 153 maybe, I don't know. where he says, I'm a hobbit in all but size. I like good tilled earth, good plain food, blah blah blah. And I kind of see myself as a very tall hobbit. I'd be the tallest by far. I'm 6'3". Um, I think the tallest hobbits were Merry and Pippin at 4'6" or 5. Um, but no, so I'm jumping into themes, but I'm obviously coloring the pages with a lot of in-depth character analyses
Yeah.
and footnoting the hell out of it. But I start out by talking about that life seems to be such where we'll enjoy our time the most if we have some sort of adventure and if we have some place to call home.
Mm.
It seems that if we're too adventurous and we don't have roots, we miss something. But if we're too homebound and we never take any sort of adventure, then we become insular and xenophobic even. And I point that out in chapter 2 and talk about all the ways in which, Lord of the Rings starts off with a gossip session about how hobbits in Bywater and Hobbiton think that or hobbits in Buckland, which is like, I don't know, 50 to 100 miles away only, are just these most strange, bizarre. They talk all sorts of shit about them. So
Mm.
they're very closed off. And in order to break free from that, we need hobbits that are extraordinary, like Sam and Merry and Pippin and Frodo and even Bilbo, your most favorite hobbit. But it's in that breaking out of their own tribe, so to speak, that they see that elves and dwarves and men aren't what we think, right? That we don't have to be afraid of them, and we don't. They could be friendly, they could be just like us in many ways, different, but just like us in many ways. So the practical application of that is, contact hypothesis, and the people we hate, we need to be in contact with. We need to see that there is a human being or a hobbit on the other side of that person that we presuppose is really this horrible, creature.
Yeah.
But in order to break free from that, we need to have some sort of adventure. We need to step outside of our little tiny tribe.
Yeah. So how does one then stay away from the siren song that is the seducing nature of insular thought? Like if you're a hobbit or a human, where you're like, yeah, but this feels like I like my echo chamber, and I'm really
Yeah.
good at being here, and I have a place here, and I know where it is.
Yeah.
Like, how do you resist that siren song?
That's a good question. I think that could be one of the most difficult questions to answer, because it seems that I don't want to fall for the trap of saying in this day and age, we've always done this. It's just that this day and age has kind of bred what we already are. So social media, the algorithms feed our. Sorry, people are messaging me. Don't they know I'm on Seth's show?
They don't. They
They
don't.
they need to know. The social media in this day and age, it feeds what's already there, and it kind of builds this echo chamber for us. Though we would find a way to, Tolkien obviously wrote these before social media and the internet, so
Mm.
there was something to the fact that many of us do stay in our own little tribe, and it's very comfortable. And the breaking out is really difficult. I think the biggest way we do that is with the help of others. So if we are homophobic and our kid comes out gay, we're forced to make a choice of, it's going to be an adventure of sorts, because you're going to have to wrestle with this thing. And the sad part is that many a times we resist opening up our boxes, and then we demonize our own children, and especially in the church, kicking out LGBTQ folks and kids into the streets. And
Yeah.
so there's a huge risk in all that. But I think just it's probably like a 10-pronged answer. We need better education. We need to read more books. We need to take seriously the fact that we don't even know what we don't know.
Mm.
So if you're talking like theology, and someone mentions Black liberation theology for the first time, and you're like, why does that even matter? Well, you can't answer that question until you listen to the person who's talking about it, and then
Yeah.
hopefully you'll see. So How we get out of that, I don't know.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
read my book and realize how wonderful Middle Earth is. Even though the Shire is wonderful too, you realize how wonderful Middle Earth is as well, and you won't know what you're missing until you go out and see. Oh, Rivendell's wonderful, or and it's scary too,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah. Yeah. What does empire look like for Hobbitdom?
oh, it's there's real. That's not. I mean, empire would be like a silly phrase to use or word to use for them. They're very um So hobbits have a thane and a sheriff, and the thane is more like the Queen of England now.
Mhm.
It's kind of just the novelty. There's not really any real power in there. The sheriff is kind of a de facto police force, but mainly like just delivering the mail and squashing like most disputes are taken care of family to family. They're very, I don't want to say anarchist,
Mhm.
because they certainly do well when a king of the whole region is, on their side, protecting and everything. Um, so they would support a monarchy in a way, though internally in the Shire there's no, so I mean there's no such thing. It's a very laissez-faire type of situation going on there.
And
Yeah.
so the Thane basically owns most of the property and then gets all that tax credit from it.
Or the
If
Thane, I
it's the
don't
Queen.
think the Thane owns any of the property.
You just said like the Queen of England. I just wanted to make the proper.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Why not?
okay, well, in that way, it would not be like the Queen of England then. But in terms of like not actually doing much, the Thane is kind of just,
Yeah, well, they make the rounds. Shake
sure.
hands, kiss babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, do the things. So, putting oneself in a mindset of a hobbit, what would that type of a person stand to gain from, I guess, transporting their mindset into the world that we live in now? Like, what is there to be gleaned that is good
From
from
living like a hobbit.
no, from living the way you and I do, in the world that we are? If the inverse was the same, so say someone
Oh,
is a hobbit writing a book about the world that you live in, Matthew, and they're like, yeah, the wisdom of humans. What would they bring
oh.
back?
I think that, wow, that's a great question. I would hope that they would encourage one another, like we were talking about, to step outside of their own little
Mhm,
world,
mhm.
to still love it and to still cherish it, but to step outside. And um, I would hope, though I think we'd fail because we fail at this. I would hope that because hobbits hated industrialization, I guess I wished, or I'd hope that the hobbits would find the humans who are doing a more ecologically minded type of industrialization. Though I think humans do fail at that as well.
I'm
Um,
not sure how to do ecologically minded industrialization. That feels like
well,
an
I mean,
oxymoron.
yeah, I mean, but I think there's companies who create products on a bigger scale who have respect for the globe, though I don't think they're the biggest companies and corporations, but
Mm,
I would, there's got to be companies that I know. I mean, like Clean Canteen is a local canteen company that has gotten pretty huge and they ship worldwide. But they have a very um, progressive ecological focus.
mm,
So, this isn't Clean Canteen, but these big canteens.
yeah.
Um, so I know it can be done, though, like I said, I think hobbits would run into humans who predominantly fail at that. So I guess that doesn't answer your question. I honestly, I'm a cynic, so I love humanity, and I don't like most humans, and I, I don't know what
I'm a
they'd glean
people
from a
person.
sad,
What's
sad.
wrong
I
with you
mean, maybe
people?
they'd be like, oh, they got some cool cars. They can fly. That's cool. I guess they went to Mars and flew into a dick-shaped rocket. Maybe that's cool, but I don't think
That
they
did
would think that's
happen.
cool at all.
That did happen. Paid for on the back of books. So
I guess.
basically, Lord of the Rings financed probably 3% of that.
Well, with
Of
how many books they sell, yeah, I know I didn't finance much of it.
yeah, in some small shape and form,
Yeah.
J.R.R. Tolkien helped fly a penis rocket into outer space. And
Okay, you write that book. I'm gonna stick with mine.
I'm not writing that book, mostly because I don't know how to title that. So, what has been the biggest change for the way that you kind of see faith and religion as you've been working your way through the wisdom of hobbits?
seeing seeing God and seeing all the mystery and complexity that we talk about God and theology is just so simple in like tending to a garden. I mean, like if God is everywhere, God is in the garden, and so how more like intimate can you get than putting your hands in the dirt and growing something?
Mm,
Um, I think that the biggest thing I think of when I'm thinking of hobbits is just their Tolkien actually describes it as they have like an ability to disappear in the landscape because of their magical relationship with the earth.
mm,
And I know that's some like deep hippie shit, but I appreciate that. And I don't know, I don't do church, I don't do prayer, but I think that the closest I would ever get is listening to some nice music while in the garden on a nice day, planting or harvesting or fertilizing or doing whatever I'm doing.
mm.
To me, like that's way closer to church and way closer to God than I ever got leading worship playing those Hillsong songs. If you know what I mean.
Well, you don't like E minor 7, so I mean, story.
I dude, I liked one of their songs maybe. That we played a lot of the Hillsong songs, dude.
They all do. Yeah,
Yeah, that's how
all
they
of the
got.
churches.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
um, yeah. So when I think of hobbits, and you don't have to agree with me because that's the nice thing about what I think. Um, I I see them as fearful beings, like
Mm.
constantly terrified
Mm-hmm.
of everything because
Mm-hmm.
everything is new. Like even reading through The
Yeah.
Hobbit, like every experience is like terrifying. Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking like 5-year-old on roller coasters you don't belong on. Like every one of them is terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think that that fits well with the world that we live in. Like everything seems to be marginally terrifying. I
Yeah.
mean, quite literally, there are two countries that yesterday could get fuel for themselves, and today they can't. That's terrifying. Like I could throw out so many examples.
Right.
Um, what do we have to gain from the way that a hobbit type person approaches fear, anxiety, trauma? Like what could we glean from that and apply for
Mm.
ourselves now?
Well, I think we'd have to focus on certain hobbits who are able to move through that.
Like whom?
My favorite character is Sam. Sam is the epitome of fearful. Like he's afraid of everything, and this isn't in the book but in the movies, he's like, "This is the farthest I've ever gotten away from the Shire."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, right here. He
right
does
here.
stop. He's like, right here. I
Yeah,
don't want to.
yeah,
Like, why'd you stop? Well, because that blade of grass right there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't remember that being in the books. I know it's not actually,
I don't know.
um, but no, it isn't. But the point of that is like, I mean, yeah, it's Sam goes from this very scared gardener who has like ideas of like seeing elves and all this kind of stuff to being known as Samwise the Brave, the one who carries Frodo up the mountain when Frodo couldn't make it, the one who rescues Frodo from Cirith Ungol after after Shelob gets to him, and then the orcs. So I think that as like the archetype that they go from being like the most, like you said, scared, fearful type of creature, being, race, whatever you want to say, to if they can get through it, we can too. We can if they can push through that to a place where they confront their fears, and we can too.
Mm.
And I think that's a good lesson to take away. What's interesting is a lot of the hobbits that are left in the Shire, when they come back after a year of journeying to Mordor and back, they're exactly the same as when they left. I mean, uh, the scouring of the Shire happens, but many of the hobbits are just the same. They haven't changed in a whole year. In
Yeah.
fact, many of them sided with Sauron. And if for those who have just watched the movies, they don't just come back to the Shire and everything's happy. I mean, the Shire has been like razed. The trees have been cut down. Saruman doesn't. Spoiler alert: Saruman doesn't die in the Two Towers. He and with the help of a bunch of hobbits, like destroy the Shire.
Hmm.
So many of them.
I don't remember that. It has been a
Yeah.
tremendously long time
Yeah,
since
so
I read
that's
that.
Jackson leaves all of that out.
Well, I haven't read that movie. I haven't read that movie. You can't read a movie. I haven't watched that
you can
movie.
read the script.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I did
But
not know
but
that.
I think the point is that the only hobbits that really change are the ones that face their fears and step out. I mean, Frodo was very fearful as well, and um, there's a great line to like Bilbo before he goes on his adventure. He's like absolutely not. I'm not going with these dwarves. And then it says something Tookish rose up in him, and Peregrine Took comes from a family of brave hobbits. The old Took, the story goes that he chopped the head off a goblin and it went 100 yards, and that's how they invented golf. So there's something within the hobbits that they're very fearful to begin with, but they can overcome it. And I mean that, again, I'm working toward this. Like I see Ukraine and Russia and climate change, and I'm like scared shitless. And rightfully so. Like they're just like, oh yeah, World War III might happen. Yeah, we might use nuclear weapons. You're like, Jesus Christ, like that is terrifying.
Yeah. The amount of times that comes up in adult conversation in a real way, and both of us at the end of the not you and I necessarily, but even like at work, and I'll be like, yeah, and the other person's like, yeah, and then we're just like, yeah, so you want to buy this house? Like, I'll figure out how to lend you the money. Might as well, because I don't know. Like, it's just such a weird world.
It's very weird.
Yeah. So want to be respectful of your time. But I will say I've enjoyed this, mostly because I like flying by the seat of my pants on something that I like. They're more fun conversations. I have no idea how you feel when you're doing an episode, but I really enjoy everything on the fly.
Well, you ask great questions, so you've really made me think.
Well,
I normally don't like to do that. I just like to,
I don't like to think. I just want to write my satire.
That's all I want to do.
Leave me the hell alone. I just want to garden and write satire. So I asked this of everyone, although I think the last time you were on, I probably did not ask you. It's been in the last few years. So when you try to put words around whatever, the divine, God, I don't care what word you want to use there. Like, what is that?
Oh, that's a small question.
Right. Just small, tiny, light question to end with.
I've been really wrestling with that lately. I'd say in the past year, especially. I sort of now see God as like pure potential in which all reality can like flow into. So does that make sense? Probably not. I don't believe in a personal God that I can talk to any longer. I don't believe even necessarily so much. It's tough because if God has a will or a personality, I just don't have any experience of that. I only have and if I do have an experience of it, I can't find where it's indistinguishable from me at the core of my best. Because I certainly have a will that's not great, but I feel like when I'm like in line with being empathetic and compassionate, I don't find that that's just indistinguishable from my own will rightly oriented toward goodness.
Hmm.
So I I don't know if I care anymore.
Hmm.
Is that bad for a
No, it's
are we
fine.
allowed to say that at church? Can I say that at church,
You
Seth?
certainly can.
I don't
Honestly,
know. Yeah, I
though,
don't know if I care about theology in that way. I care about being a good human and being loving and compassionate and empathetic. And I care about the world in which I live.
mhm,
And I think the question of God becomes almost like too abstract for me to care any longer.
mm, yeah, no, fine answer. I'll tell you why I asked that question after I'm done recording. Because there is a method to that madness. So the book's out whenever it's out. Who knows when it's out? Because I don't know how. I've never written a book. I've had thoughts that I should
Yeah.
write a book, and then
Yeah.
realize that it's more work than I want to do, and
Yeah, who wants
watch
to do all that?
watch Netflix instead. Um, so
Do people
um,
still Netflix and chill? Is that
I
a thing?
Netflix and sleep. Like I literally turn it on. Although I've been, and this is a guilty pleasure, although I'm enjoying it less and less, but I've been started. So Top Gun is back on there, and
I
I don't
heard
know why, but I really like that movie. I
you
and
do.
I think I realized it on. I was watching it on my lunch break today.
Is it the homoerotic undertones?
No,
Because I'm
it's the
that's fine.
Jets. Like I enjoy watching the Jets, and I actually thought about it on my way home from work today. I was like, why am I enjoying this movie so much? Because I'm not. The story's pretty crappy. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of a lot of what happens in it. Um, but I used to go to like air shows out where I'm
Okay.
from in Midland and Odessa,
Yeah.
Texas, and there was like B-52 bombers that would fly in, and like professional, I would call them athletes, like those fighter pilots that are sustaining like 9, 10, 8, whatever G's and doing these
Yeah.
acrobatic, like something about that. Like, I'm like, man, that is freaking amazing that
Yeah.
one, a human can withstand it, but two, we built machines that can do it. And,
Yeah.
it's just a little bit in the movie, where they're doing the dog fights. And I think it's that
Yeah.
is what I like. And it doesn't matter. I don't even know why I brought that up. Netflix and chill. It's your fault.
It's always my fault. Just blame me.
So you do a lot of things on the in the globe. Where do you want people to go to engage into the things that you happen to be doing?
Oh, well, social media is fine. My website is
Yeah.
allsetfree.com, and all of my social media handles are just on a little icon because, I have a web guy who's good at his job. So, yeah, everything is like linked through there. All the books are there. The podcasts are there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Speaking of
yeah.
social media, I meant to ask you this and I didn't. What would be the
Yeah.
social media of choice from the choices that you have today for a Hobbit?
Oh, the social media of choice for a Hobbit?
Yeah, of the ones that we have today, everything from TikTok to
Yeah.
Facebook. Yeah, what would be the one where you're like, yeah, this is my jam?
I just can't imagine him on TikTok. Is Pinterest social media? They would just
I
be pinning recipes
I
to second for food.
yeah, fine,
I,
fair enough. I
I
think it
think they
counts as a social media. I think it
I
is.
would the first one that popped into my head would be Pinterest.
It's not a
Um,
word that I thought of in a long time. Pinterest.
maybe maybe a very small group on a Facebook group. Um,
It's a
I
ridiculous
maybe
question. I like how seriously you're considering it.
I'm serious, very serious about this. Pippin would probably have a really idiotic Twitter account. I'm gonna guess at Fool of a Toque or something. I don't know.
Oh. Either way, I like to end on laughter. With that, I'll give you back your evening. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to
Yeah,
reading the book because
thanks.
I do like those characters. And I like that world. Um,
Well,
and I'm looking.
my goal in the book is to make the world like even more likable for those who aren't huge fans like I am,
Yeah,
or huge nerds, as my wife says as she rolls her eyes as I'm
everybody's a nerd about something. Just admit
right.
it. Everybody's a nerd about something. Like I've watched
I would
people spew out fantasy football and fantasy baseball facts, and I'm like, why are you doing fantasy baseball? It's already a 300 game season. It's not, but it might as well be. Like, what do you? Come on.
right.
Yeah.
Well, so it's funny that the people who made fun of the nerds now have like the most nerdiest thing, which is fantasy sports, and
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, okay. Well, I
Yeah.
like sports too, but just admit
Yeah.
we're all nerds. I
Yeah.
love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. With that. Good. 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 Well, thank you again, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.